Welcome to this Audit Tuesday GRC podcast, CISO Reality Check, Identity Risk. I'm Garrett Grajak, founder of UATest, and most importantly, we have Larry Whiteside Jr., 8-time CISO, okay? I'll have him do some intros, but co-founder of Cyberversity, board member, CSA, right? And, which is really exciting, y'all, is co-founder of Confide Group. Okay, we're going to cover today on this cyber podcast CISO's responsibility around identity and identity risk. And to help lead the conversation, we have old hand out of there, San Antonio, good friend, Jerry Simpson.
Who are you calling old?
Greetings, guys. Fantastic.
Yeah. And thanks, Garrett, for putting this together, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Take it away, guys.
All right. So I'm Jerry Simpson. I'm a fractional business development. I got about 6 cybersecurity solutions that I represent. My passion is really about helping the little guys and as well supporting our veterans. I think those guys deserve that more than anything. And I I appreciate Garrett for putting this together. Garrett is one of my clients. And thank you everybody who's joined. We're going to kick this off. The key topics we're talking about today, as Garrett mentioned, is why identity governance is a CISO's responsibility now. The common blind spots in enterprise access management, and then the role of access reviews, including in reducing risks. And then we're going to talk about aligning identity strategy with compliance and business priorities. And then I want to hear from Larry and what his team and himself and his team are really hearing from security leaders at the top out there. So let's kick this off. Larry, tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you?
Man, so
you really want to impress them? Tell them how many kids you got.
So I am a father of 7. It's a blended family. I had 5 with my ex-wife, and my current wife had 2 with her ex-husband. And so I'm very blessed. At the end of the day, who am I? I'm just a guy. That's what I like to say. I'm just a guy. But I'm a faith-led guy. I've done the CISO, CTO, CSO role 8 times over my career. I'm an ex-military officer. But again, most importantly, I'm a man of faith. I'm a husband, and I'm a father, and I'm a friend.
Your first role as a cybersecurity specialist was in the Pentagon. Thank you for your service, by the way.
Yeah. It was interesting because I fell into cyber. It's so interesting, right? So cyber wasn't a thing back, in the early 90s, and so I didn't anticipate it. I sort of joined the military at the behest of my grandfather. So when I graduated college in '94. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. My grandfather, who was a Tuskegee Airman, God rest his soul, said, hey, go be a pilot. That tech thing is going to go away someday, but we'll always need pilots. I was like, yeah. But to get him off my back, I went and spoke to a recruiter who then told me that there were tech roles in the military. So I was like, let's go, right? So that sort of was my jump start. But I didn't know about security, right? And so once I joined and I got my commission and I went into the military, then this IT security thing became a thing. And I learned about defense in depth and all these different things. I thought I was going to be a computer programmer, but God had other plans, and it actually worked out. It just worked itself out because, so for me, I'm a true believer that to be good in security, you have to have a certain mindset. There's a way of thinking as it relates to risk and protection and detection and threats and all those different things. The mindset that you have around it will help you be successful. But more than anything else, you have to find and align to a passion. This career field is so broad. There's so many areas in it that you can get into. You've got to find something that you are passionate about, because I've watched and I've seen the statistics. People who come into this field for the money will be burnt out in 7 years because long hours are a thing. It's just the reality of the field.
And there's safety in a multitude of counselors too, and that's I think why I want to touch on that. you're one of the chief advisors for the CISO Society, which is a 1,500 member CISO coalition, if you'd call it.
Yeah, it's a
Tell us a
community. It's
little
a
bit about
community.
that, if you will.
Yeah.
How'd you get started with that?
So my business partner at Confide, Jason, about 3.5, almost 4 years ago, came up with the idea of starting a community for CISOs. And when he said it, I was like, yeah, that's great. There's a couple of things that exist, but like, how is this going to be executed? And the reality is, because of the character of Jason and because of his ability to sort of understand and have conversations with people, he got that it just needed to be a community where people can go and have a safe space. As a
Yeah,
CISO,
and they can find counselors too. They can find people to advise them and people they're going to trust, right?
well,
And
yeah,
be
and
able to
that
trust.
and that's the thing. The role of the CISO is the most at-risk role in the entire cyber ecosystem. And when I say at risk, not at risk of elimination, but at risk of lawsuit, at
Jail.
risk of termination,
Yeah,
at risk of jail, at risk based on being targeted by vendors, by
yeah,
venture capital, by like it is the CISO role is being bombarded on from many, many different angles.
yeah.
So we have longed for a long time for a safe space for us to be able to come together in community. And so that's what the CISO Society gives us, is a
Awesome,
community. And so
awesome,
I go around the country participating in around the globe, actually participating in events that we do to bring people together in their local communities to talk about topics of need and just basically be a guide, to be there to help people figure out how to solve problems.
awesome. Give them your email address real quick. People want to reach out to you and get involved in that. Give them the website, I guess,
Yeah,
real
yeah,
quick.
yeah. They can. It's really easy. If you are a cyber executive, if you go to thecISOsociety.com, right, you join. There's a vetting process. There's some definite privacy policies and some hard community rules, but you go there. We've got a vetting process that we'll go through to verify that you actually are a sitting CISO or have held the title. And so not everybody gets in, right? We've had a lot of people apply that want to get in. It is a closed community and not everybody gets in.
Awesome,
But we
awesome.
do that purposefully because we need to protect the members.
Okay, cool. Before we get too far into this, Garrett, why don't you take a minute? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about
I,
your test, where you
I could
come
listen to
from.
Larry talk on
Who
it
are
because
you?
I
Yeah, me
couldn't
too,
agree
right?
more. When he said, we got to find what your passion is, it's a wide field, right, Larry? Come on. We remember the days. And yeah, I started as a programmer and I did. I love it's fun. And I'm getting into my Python to do AI programming and all that. So it's fun. Okay. But I was hired and Larry knows everyone. So all you have to do is talk to Larry and say, hey, Larry, yeah, I was there. He goes, oh, yeah, I know that guy, whatever. I was hired at Cylance to create AI around identity. Why? Because I'm known as an identity guy. I did way early in the career, did a bunch of SC work over at RSA, wonderful forward-thinking company called Netegrity. If we don't want to date ourselves, first SSO company. And then I took the concept of the two-factor and the identity SSO stuff from Netegrity and created SecureAuth from scratch. That was the first two-factor IDP. Then went over, which was fun, with Stu and team over at Cylance. Okay. And that was ludicrously forward thinking with real heavy hitters at every domain. Okay. Just amazing company that way. And we created the first AI-based UEBA, on the device. Now there's wonderful companies like Sentinel and CrowdStrike who are doing that in the cloud. We did it on the device first and we showed that it could do it. And I'm really big on that concept, y'all, is what we need is the vendors like SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, et cetera, and UATest, which we'll talk about, giving us a signal and passing it on to the enforcement points. We can get into that later and that kind of stuff, but that's something I really see the industry going. And my work over at Cylance brought me over to UATest, where I created AI-based identity trust and identity recertification. But as Larry says, we all pick our passions, and we should. And Larry, you with the 7, me with the 2. I talk that all the time. All right, how are you going to differentiate yourself? What are you doing? If you're all bored, I can put up the site that I just built for my daughter's volleyball team, or the
And you-
stuff that I do for
right.
my son's guitar playing. But
And
pick our passions.
and yeah, and your passion can't be as broad as just cybersecurity because there's so many
No.
tentacles
Thanks,
out there.
Jerry.
So let's kick that off, right? We're going to dive into the big picture around identities, right? In the enterprise today. So Larry, what's the current state of identities in that space?
Unfortunately, it's still all over the place. These are Larry's thoughts around identity. Identity is a pillar of what cyber is held up on, right? So if you think about the founding principles of cybersecurity, it is know what you have, know who has access to it. Like those are two founding principles of cyber. Know what you have, whether it's assets from a physical asset standpoint, assets from a logical standpoint, right? Data is an asset. Keys are an asset. Know what you have. Then know who has access to it. Identity. Understand where you have usernames and passwords, right? And identities. Keys are a component of identity. Like all of these things matter. But we have struggled mightily as an industry on both sides of these, knowing what you have and knowing who has access to it. And today, our discussion around identity, I think it's crucially important to understand that the longer we go without getting this pillar right, right, the more problems we're going to have because the cloud exacerbated identity to a level we didn't even anticipate, right?
Yeah.
So now, because of that, where we just had the identity space in the beginning, now we've got new spaces that are being created because people want to put a focus on other things, right? Inside the identity space. So it's being carved up. You've got NHI. NHI, we didn't consider a system identity, right? Where machines are talking back and forth to each other as an NHI, non-human identity. It was an identity. But now, because of the cloud and how many systems are being spun up and spun down, and how many system-based identities are being created, an entire new ecosystem of identity has been created as a sub-identity in this overall identity stack. So identity is getting worse. and unfortunately, a lot of times things have to get worse before they get better. So I'm hoping that this getting worse is going to start the bell curve of, okay, we're going to start getting better.
That's a great overview. So how are these practices working, do you think? I mean, what's working and what's not? I mean, what if CISOs need to focus more on?
So I will say this. There's one I like to share the good with the bad. So I do think that from a human identity, because now we have non-human, so I've got to talk about human. From a human identity standpoint, having a single directory has gotten better, right? So because if you think about it, back in the late 90s, back in the early 2000s, you had Novell, you had Active Directory. Those are two primary identity stores that existed. If it existed outside of that, then it was a singular thing sitting on a Sun microsystem, sitting on some Unix system, right? So I think we've gotten pretty good holistically about having human-based identities called together into a singular location. Great. That's one. But now we've got these other aspects of identities, these non-human, these system identity, all of these other forms of identity that exist out there that we haven't really done a great job of creating a singular directory. The additional piece is the governance of all this, right? When you think about what I'll call the landscape, or no, let's call it the path of identity from assignment, right? So somebody getting an identity to be utilized for some task to the decommissioning, where now that identity no longer needs to be used, right? Because the task that it was performing, it's outdated, it's old system, whatever. There's a lot in between, and
Do you
we
think CISOs have a grip on that whole process
God,
and
no,
that whole?
not even
No,
remotely
no,
close. Not
yeah.
even remotely
And
close.
Larry, and this is where I have to ask you, because you being a CISO, you running these groups, isn't it kind of funny that we all, in you get a group of guys, and you say the most important part of security now is identity. Most CISOs don't have a strong identity background. They're
Well,
very strong network
there's a
background,
reason though.
very strong. Yeah.
There's a reason. Identity used to not be in security,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Identity
yeah.
was run by IT. So
Hmm.
Good
security
point.
used to be focused on perimeter, right? It used to be focused on the edge. It used to be focused
Right.
in the layers, right? Internet facing, non-internet facing. But identity was off in the IT space.
Right.
Dude, we had nothing to do with it. Healthcare
Yeah.
started
If
driving.
the CISO goes, I did my pen test, I got my tenable scan, I'm good to go, you know? What are you doing
That's
over
I
the
think in some
identity world?
organizations that's still the case, isn't it? I
it
mean,
is.
and you know what, depending on what tools they're using too, I think a lot of it boils down to, are the tools they're using giving them what they need to manage that end-to-end process,
Yeah,
the
but
life cycle of the identity.
some CISOs don't want it. I know personally
Yeah.
multiple CISOs who have walked into a CISO role and had identity and said, and when I asked why, they said it's too complex.
Yeah.
I don't want responsibility for identity because it's so complex. I don't want the responsibility of creating outages where someone can't access things because that's a big right. If you look at help desk metrics and statistics, right, the number one call into the help desk is always what? Password resets,
Yes.
right? It's
I can't
password
get
resets.
access.
That's the number one thing a help desk deals with. I don't care what company you're in. It's password resets. People don't, security people were not conditioned to handle those things, right? But what's happened is over the years, security has started to realize controlling identity actually helps you as a cyber leader, right? If you can control identity, it helps you as a cyber leader actually get a better handle on the practice of cybersecurity in your organization.
Yeah.
So that started to shift. But additionally, what happened is in the mid to late 2000s, HIPAA began to mandate, right, that if you were utilizing an EDR, you had to do access reviews. Access reviews were a mandatory component of what you had to do. So I was at a big health system. I owned that. I had 10 people just on the
Nobody
identity.
wants to do them.
No, but
A nightmare.
it's a lot. It's a lot to
Yeah.
do, right?
Yeah.
And to this day, it's for a lot of people, it's still a what I'll call a paper-driven process, right? Meaning you've got Excel sheets and you've got right. It's and even if you have some workflow through a ServiceNow or through something, it's still painful, right? It is still painful because it's just not very fluid. And it's not natural for security leaders. It's not natural for
Yeah.
security teams.
Yeah, it's one thing to
So
do them. It's another thing to attest to them, right? You've got to document that you have done them, because when it comes down to it, the person that's going to decide whether you are compliant or not is your mom and mine. That's going to be on the jury, right? So if you don't have the ability to attest to that, how are you going to get defended in the fact that you did your access reviews?
well, and that so that's the new carrot. It's court, right?
Yeah.
Like if I've got to legally defend that I perform these actions, and I can't just show you an Excel spreadsheet, see we did them, or I can't just show you in like court now coming at cyber leaders. That's right based on regulatory fines and regulatory.
Yep.
That's a whole nother ball game that has started to have cyber leaders start to say, "Oh man, like I got like these are some areas I've got to fix and I've got to figure out," because which is why you're seeing right now the number of identity governance tools that have come out over the last 2 to 3 years is crazy, right? NHI and identity governance are the two hottest items in the identity space right now because it's just blown up. Thank you, Cloud.
NHI, that's one went over my head. Maybe some others too. What's NHI?
Non-human identity.
Non-human. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, that paints a clear picture on those challenges.
Larry,
Garrett,
and just so the audience, to be fair, that's what you attest is user access reviews. Our counts now easily 20-25% of the work, especially in the smaller companies, is service accounts and non-human entities, right? And the governance on those, because hackers love NHIs.
Yeah.
Right?
Listen, That's how they move laterally, right? Let's think about it just from an architecture and engineering standpoint. You build some machines. They need to talk to each other via an API or directly, right? You create an account with a password on a machine or on this API. It utilizes it to authenticate the right back and forth. You then go off to build something else. And what mechanism are you utilizing to remind you that you built that one this week and the next one the next week and the next one the next, right? And so the number of non-human identities just starts to go boop, 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 boop.
Yeah.
But now they're sitting there and they've been, and what we used to do, what used to happen is literally used to be you could have identities sitting unchanged for years. Like just sitting there, like nobody's changed the password. No, but that's the thing that allowed lateral movement. Because somebody get a hold of that password, the person left the company, so now you don't even know it existed because we didn't track them. It became a whole different level of problem.
Yeah, and when we do these user access reviews and the company's using UATest, they start asking people, this is the privileges this NHI, this service account has. Are you comfortable with that? Right? And the truth is, no, people just don't know what they don't know. And
Right.
that's why, and this came up with in recommended user access reviews for people to recertify, yeah, Bob's no longer with us. He gave that permission, all that.
Right.
Larry, you said something that I loved. You talked about help desk. My first job in identity was the help desk person. Okay. And I always say this to people who you get it because you're in this world. A lot of non-IT people don't do it. Go, how are IT privileges decided? Well, very often, who yells the loudest at the support person? Okay. And that was, my job. My sales guy can't get in. He needs this access. All right, fine, whatever. My breaks in 30 minutes. I'll just give him access. That happens. That's real.
Yeah.
That's privilege escalation, privilege creep in a real world.
Hey guys, this is great stuff. And I hate to interrupt it, but we got a question in from the audience. And I want to invite the audience. Please put your questions in the chat. Happy to take them. So Kate came in. Can you share a real world story where small identity slip up led to bigger trouble and what it taught the team? Follow up to that, do you believe current identity tools are sufficient or just too hyper focused?
So I'm gonna deal with the second part of that first, right? So it really depends on your use case, right? So the reason that we've gotten hyper-focused identity tools today is because there's big gaps in certain areas, right? So service accounts and what we're calling NHIs today are a huge gap area because the entire industry was focused on human-based identities, right? So NHIs exist, they're hard-coded passwords and applications, right? That's a problem. System passwords that have been set and never changed. That's a problem. API keys, all of these different things that have credentials that are system-to-system communication, it's a problem. So the reality is I think there had to be some narrowing in on focus on certain areas in an effort to put a spotlight on an area to try and change it, to try and fix it. And it's done that. Listen, the NHI companies out there have begun to move the needle there because they've given some visibility into an area that people weren't thinking about, right? Now, what I believe is going to do, what is going to happen is they're all going to spread out, right? Or they're going to get acquired by another big identity company. But what this is doing is this is driving governance. Because now people are like, okay, wait, we got this whole area that we haven't focused on, that we haven't thought anything about. We've been focusing on human identities. And yeah, we've run some form of governance and check and balance. And, oh, this person is changing roles. What are the new roles they need? The challenge is we've often done what are the new roles and what's the new access they need? But we don't go, what do they no longer need? We rarely do that part. So now the person who's been in the organization the longest and had the most roles typically has the most access because as they've gained more access, we never took stuff away. Additionally, we haven't gotten granular enough at providing the access to people where they specifically where they need it. We tend to go, oh, I'm bringing Garrett on. He's in a role similar to Jerry, so just give him the same access. Whoa, right? So, I do think that the narrowing was important. I think it's going to spread back out. Now, to your first thing, I don't have any personal stories that I can share, right, without sort of throwing an organization under the bus with an incident that happened, right? So I'll try and be as broad as I can, right? So I have seen at an organization where there was an instance that a laptop actually had a system account on it. Now, why it had that system account on it, right? I don't know. Nobody was able to answer the question, but it had a system-based account on it that gave it SSH access into another system, right? Now, that SSH access, right, was fine. But what happened was because, secure connection, great. Well, they got on they got on a fake Wi-Fi system because they were out in a public area, used the public Wi-Fi that, nowadays it is very, very, very easy to stand up your own Pineapple and create your own Wi-Fi mimicking a Starbucks or mimicking something else, right? And be able to capture all the data. And so they did. They captured the data. They were able to get on this person's computer, and they found this other identity. Well, when they found this other identity, because there weren't enough controls in place from another computer, they were able to SSH in to this system. Right now, after everything was said and done, it was identified that this SSH key and identity had been created 12 years prior. Nobody knew about it. Nobody knew the system that it connected to, what it was doing. It was stood up. It had been built a long time ago. It had just never been shut down. And this wasn't even cloud. This was a physical system inside of a data center that then allowed the threat actor to just boop, boop, bounce around from one place to another, right? There are probably other stories if I sat and thought about it that I could probably talk about, but I'm trying to figure out a way to be very broad about it.
No, yeah, in profession then. Jerry, can I go on top of that first one?
Go for it.
The hyper, because guilty is charged. Okay. And when I mean it, and we all, after a while in this industry, Larry, you've been doing this forever, like myself, and Jerry, I won't say old because I got called that, right? So, but there is personalities in this in cyber. There really are. I mean, we talked about Stu, Larry, and we talk about companies, right? There's personalities, yes, and we are really good at our goofy little silos. I'm going to bring up one slide, which I did a webinar with a gentleman from the CISA, and it really helps me explain. Hang on, am I showing the zero trust slide, guys?
Yep.
Okay, so I don't see this explained enough this way about zero trust, and I love zero trust, and it says traditional is what Larry was talking about, right? People using spreadsheets for user access reviews and all that. Okay, that's traditional. Initially, we start using tools like UATest, and that's good. It's automated, right? Don't worry, I'm going to get to the gentleman's point. Okay. Advanced is we start using things like AI and intelligence, which we put in UATest. But what is the most important, relevant to this gentleman's question, is optimal is when these siloed products like UATest pass the information over to other products. That's where we have to get. That's where I ask you, the customers out there, to help me when I'm talking, because I approach other companies and say, listen, I have this identity trust score, which is great for the governance person, great for the identity, but that information needs to be passed on to what? To the WAF, to the application, to the application proxy. That's where we as an industry need to go. So the gentleman's not wrong in asking, saying, hey, there's all these siloed, products, right? And that's why the CISA did a great job as a maturity model calling this practice out.
Yep.
And just to add something for, everyone to research afterwards, that's the concept of shared signals.
I'll go on top of that, Garrett. In addition
Go for
to cleaning things up and feeding it into your GRC, I would say framework, but there's other things you can do like microsegmentation to stop lateral
Yes.
movement, right?
Yes.
And by the way, I have clients that can help with that as well. So, I think that's an area you're talking absolutely right. That there needs to be the optimal, not just taking care of these and cleaning up these identities, but putting together in place other solutions that can really, if you do get an attack into somewhere, someone gets their password out there and they get in, stop the lateral movement. So
Yeah. So I'll make this last statement as it relates to that statement around identity tools. Are they sufficient or too hyper focused? The reality is anytime you are building a product to solve a problem, you have to pick a lane. And you pick a narrow lane because you have to get good at one thing before you can start working down the path of doing other things. If you look at pretty much every product that has come to market in the history of cyber, they came in very good at a specific thing because it is too Herculean an effort to try and come in and say, we're going to solve all of these problems. You just can't, because what happens is then you are good at nothing. You're okay at a lot of things, but good at nothing. And I don't want to pick on anybody, but if you think about what Microsoft has done over the years, right? In their early days, right, when they started trying to build security products into the Microsoft ecosystem, you only bought them because like you had an E3 or E5 license. It wasn't until they took their EDR and actually put some very specific focus and said, we're going to focus on building EDR. We're not going to focus broad. We're going to focus on building an EDR. Now Microsoft's EDR performs relatively well against the other players in the space. That wasn't the case early in the day, right? So I think for every technology solution, identity being one of them, most companies are going to have to come in narrowly before they start going wide.
that's a good segue, Garrett. Why don't you leave us with how does UAttest address user access reviews and identity governance automation?
I wanted to go back to one classic one, and we can not call them out, but itemize. And I'll go to user access reviews. The one where the gentleman said, asked, hey, is there a case where a little small screw up caused big damage? Well, we all know, at least I was ran a two-factor at the time, the Target example. Target had an HVAC.
That's a great one.
Yeah, Larry's laughing because he knows. Yeah.
That's a great one.
HVAC account. What is that? Eating? I can't know what that is.
Well, wait. So let's go back even further. So
Thanks.
it was actually the website of the HVAC company.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? That was first identified as the original mechanism that allowed the threat actor in. Then once they got in through their website, they then got access to an HVAC account. That HVAC account gave them remote access to HVACs in the Target ecosystem. Then once they got on the HVAC in the Target ecosystem, that Target didn't have the network segmented, so the HVAC could reach the point of sale network, right? And so you talk about crawling and pivoting, right?
No, and overprivileged. It was overprivileged accounts, and that's that we say, okay, yes, they shouldn't have been able to hack the HVAC account, but you almost have to assume that our accounts are getting hacked, right? And then what privileges were those accounts given? And that brings us to Jeremy's wonderful question about, user access reviews. And as Larry brilliantly stated, that's what we did at UAttest. There was when I finished up my work over at Silence, I was working with a lot of people at the IAMs, be it Okta, Azure AD, Jump Cloud, and was asked about a certain segment of the industry, which is once the deployment occurs, once the two-factor set up, once the SSO is done, there is a need to recertify the users on a regular basis. I mean, usually now at a quarterly basis and recommended monthly on your admin accounts in AWS or whatever. Okay. And there's wonderful tools for that for the top 3% of the market if you have 18 months to deploy the legacy user access review products. And what we did at UATest is literally take a use case. I took an old CISO that I worked with many times because Larry, CISOs are good. They struggle with the real. Then I took an auditor, a gentleman named Raj Swani, now at CDW, and I said, how do you guys communicate? What do you communicate? How do you do it? Raj, what do you ask for? Kelly, what do you respond with? And we created UATest based on that that use case. And now we've done 3.8 million of these attestations. And as you stated, Larry, it is constant focus. It's laser focus on that process and taking the input from our customers on how it should be done. Maybe multiple levels. Now we have multiple levels. What's the workflow should be done? What's the delegation? What's the auto delegation? All of that is now quantified in a zero code product.
And this is,
yes.
And most of your identity management solutions aren't doing this. They don't have a way within them to do that. Or if they do, they're very expensive to deploy and deploy that piece of it. So
the gaps in the space of this, there's the gaps in the space. First of all, there's great, real high-end products. If you got a couple $1 million and you're, the state of Michigan, great. There's some great products that for 18 months, you're going to get that thing deployed. Okay. What if you're a regular shop, anywhere from 100 to 5,000 users, and you got a decent provisioning system, you get a decent SSO system, but this keeps coming up on your SOX, on your HIPAA, on your NIST reviews that you're not doing user access to you. What are you going to do? The IAMs themselves may have a lightweight solution, but I work with financial and healthcare a lot. Our stuff's not all integrated, and it never will be. It's just not. So those are left out there. And that's what we did at UATest. We talked to our customers and said, okay, what do you got? We have an IAM, Garrett. We've got Ping. We've got Azure AD. We got AD. We've got Okta. Okay, why don't I use that as my basis of review and then input in the siloed accounts? And that's what we do. And it allows them to do a complete review and a test to all the privileges. And then something happened interesting in the last 5 years. And Larry, maybe you can comment on this. We see more and more of enterprise IT, including now governance, being outsourced into the MSP space in a consultant. So we built an RBAC version of this for the managed service providers, and now actually provided as a service for the MSPs. So Larry, do you see that as a movement in our space?
Yeah, so in the SMB space, the small medium-sized businesses, there's a lot of that, right? Because in a small to medium-sized business, you do not have the resources to have a full IT and security team. You just don't. So MSPs are growing like weeds in a field, right, to support small to medium-sized businesses. And it is great because it's a needed service. And what they're beginning to be able to offer because of tools like UATest are coming in saying, hey, we've got a mechanism where you can go protect your clients. And what it gives the SMBs, it gives them the economy of scale to be able to utilize a tool that they may not be able to afford and or run and manage themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so as we've moved into the cloud and begun to use the cloud a lot more as a technology ecosystem, MSPs are now able to provide services to these SMBs that are giving them more corporate type services that they wouldn't have had access to otherwise.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up with final thoughts, guys, from each of you. Let's start with Larry, but as we're doing that, I want to invite the audience again to put any questions you have in the chat before we go. We'll try to get those answered. And if anyone needs information on this, I may have the easiest email to remember. That's information@mytech.network. I can get you in touch with Larry or with Garrett, and as well as other capabilities in the cybersecurity space. So Larry, why don't you wrap up with any final thoughts, and we'll wrap up with Garrett's.
So one, if you want to reach me, reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. Final thoughts is understand the importance of identity. If you're a cyber professional, do not slump off identity as it's IT's job. It is the foundation of what our industry is built on. It is a foundational pillar. So if you don't own identity as a cyber professional, that's okay, but you should understand it. You should be able to actually govern it and be able to hold IT accountable to doing it properly. Because at the end of the day, right, if an identity is compromised and you have to stand up an incident response team, guess who's responsible for incident response?
Yeah. Guess who's going to be
Security.
fined or go to jail? The CISO. Yeah.
Right? But security runs it. Security runs
Yeah.
incident response, period. IT is a part of the incident response team, but the CIO or no one on the IT side typically is the incident commander. It's typically a cyber practitioner who is leading it. So if you are in cyber and you are not understanding how your identity landscape operates inside your organization and how it's governed, then you are missing a huge opportunity to have a better cyber program.
That's awesome. And you made a thought come to my mind about should CISOs be taking out their own separate insurance policy against cyber threats, cyber attacks.
Well, that's a whole other webinar because
Yeah, I know, right?
that's starting to happen. Like so that
Yeah.
is beginning to happen because CISOs had not historically, especially in the SMB space, CISOs have not been getting D&O insurance. In the Fortune 100, yes. Fortune 500, maybe, right? So that's starting to be a thing. There are organizations that are coming up that have offered regular liability and cyber insurance that are now starting to offer executive insurance for cyber executives specifically.
Right. Garrett, final thoughts.
I just saw because this is what I was thinking, and it just came out in a question. Teams move fast and want fewer hurdles. What's basic rule of thumb for letting them stay agile without giving up security? It's automation.
Yeah.
That's what we do with UATest is automate.
I've said this many times to many people. If you're trying to throw, and I'm a big believer in putting people to work and keeping jobs, but if you're trying to throw people at a problem, your attackers are using AI or automation to attack you with, good luck with that. You got to automate. You've got to automate this process.
Well, that's right. Here, so let me say this. So we are carbon-based. That's what I like to call us, carbon-based life forms.
Yeah.
As carbon-based life forms, we are flawed by the way we're built. Period. Like it's the natural state of our being is flawed, right? We are always going to try and take the shortest route, right, to get to our end goal. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Process is not natural. It's just not. So the attestation process, governance, those are not natural processes that we as everyday humans want to do. People who are good at that, they're good at that because they choose to be, but it is not natural. The only way that you get good at governance and you get good at process is by automating. It's just the reality of the world, right?
Yeah. Automating and documenting will help save you in that court scenario. You have to have proper documentation that you did it. Yep. And you had a plan, you documented your plan, and you proved that you followed the plan.
Okay, Jerry, you asked for it. This is my favorite slide of the deck. This is are we seeing my Cynthia Stair?
Know her.
Lawyer out of Texas, comes to ISSA in downtown LA, looks at the audience and says, I can't defend you guys anymore. You don't keep the evidence of your work. And that's what Larry's been saying and Jerry's been saying. And that's what UATest does. It shows that you executed the principle of least privilege by doing your access reviews. But that's what is needed.
Yep. Awesome, guys. This has been a great session. Thank you both. Thank you to the audience, those of you who took the time to join us. And we'll close with that.
Larry, how does everyone reach you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am the only Larry Whiteside Jr. Yeah, it's easy to find.
Or reach out to me, information at mytech.network or Jerry at mytech.network. It's very easy to remember.
Yeah, and we're at uatest.com or Garrett Grayjack. There's only one. So it's all good. Thanks, guys. That was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, Larry.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.